Well, hello, everybody. It's great to see so many people signing on. Nice to have you with us this afternoon. Thank you for taking the time. Give me a shout out. We'll get started with the formal, I'll introduce myself and we'll get started with the formal program in just a minute. But give me a shout out, if you would, in the chat box, just to let me know that you can see this introductory title slide for the program and that you're hearing my voice clearly. And that would be very helpful. So give me a shout out. Hi. Hey, Pat, Angeli, Donna, nice seeing you here. Thanks so much for being here. Virgie, Ursula, appreciate you being with us this afternoon. Thank you. Deborah, Ivan, Seema, Teresa, Mary Beth, great to have you all on board. So again, just give me a shout out. Let me know your video and audio are good, and we'll get started in just 1 second. Okay, respecting everybody's time this afternoon and evening, let's get started. On behalf of the Pastoral Medical Association, I want to welcome everybody. My name is Peter Jenkins. I'm the acting director for PMA practitioners and health network subscribers in terms of marshaling external resources. Dr. Eric Carter, PMA's general manager and overseer, is intending to be with us this afternoon. I'm hoping that Eric will be able to join us. Eric is on the road. We're not sure how good his internet connection is going to be, but hopefully he'll be with us. Just checking now. Eric, are you there? Can you hear me? Hello. Okay, apparently not, but hopefully Eric can hear this presentation. If Eric, Dr. Carter, is not able to join in with us, please know on his behalf that he welcomes you here. So from a broad overview, let's take a look at the goals for the program. We want to make sure that today you come away with an understanding of the unique value of the PMA license and what it can do for you in your practice. We're going to do an overview of the PMA Agreement for Wellness Services, or AWS. This is a critical aspect of your pastoral practice. It establishes the nature of the relationship between you as a PMA pastoral counselor and your clients. And then we're going to discuss the diverse legal issues relating to your PMA licensing and practice as well. We want to make sure that we get all your questions answered about what you can and can't do from a legal standpoint, and how to stay out of trouble and how to avoid secular governmental regulation and interference with your practice. So those are the broad goals of our program. Okay, so with those broad goals for the program this afternoon, I want to introduce you now to Attorney David Gibbs, PMA's outside counsel. David is not with us in person this afternoon, but at our request, he's prepared a video for your viewing discussing PMA licensing and the legal issues involved. This program is 17 minutes long, and while it's playing, I want to encourage you to take notes for yourself, of course, but also, if you have any questions, just type those questions in the chat box, and we'll look to get those answered for you later on in the program today.
Hi, I'm Attorney David Gibbs III with the National Center for Life and Liberty. I want to greet you as we are putting this online webinar training together and share with you that the goals we have for this session are twofold. Number one, we want to overview the new PMA Agreement for Wellness Services, often referred to as the AWS. And then number two, we're going to discuss all of the diverse legal issues that are impacting your practice. And what we want to do is let you accomplish your goals. So we want you to have maximum effectiveness, but we'd like to see that done with minimal liability. We're certainly honored to serve with the PMA and to help in these arenas. And we want to let you know, if you have any questions, the NCLL, our team, is available to answer any concerns or thoughts that you may have. First of all, as you look at the Agreement for Wellness Services, you can visit the PMA website and pull it up, and you can navigate to it by looking online at the links that are being provided to you. As you make your way to it, you'll notice that there are some specific provisions where the Agreement for Wellness Services is up on the screen. Now, what the AWS does is it defines your relationship with your clients. These are the people that are coming in and you're having the opportunity to minister. Understanding the nature of that relationship begins with an understanding of pastoral science and medicine and the basis of your PMA license. Pastoral science and medicine, as we put in the slides, PS&M, is the term that's used to describe the system of natural approaches. These are founded upon spiritual principles to promote and improve physical, mental, and spiritual health. That's what your PMA license authorizes you to offer to your clients. Now, in promoting your services, we advertise that clients of PMA practitioners achieve health improvements by making positive lifestyle changes and following other natural procedures that are scripturally sound, scientifically based, and professionally administered pursuant to acceptable standards of care. The PS&M services you're permitted to offer under your PMA license are defined and they're limited by what we call the PMA scope of practice. If you look at that, all activities under your license need to be within 8 categories. Number 1, they need to be scripture-based. Number 2, they must be within the documented education and training you possess. Number 3, they need to only include safe, natural substances and protocols. Number 4, they must address one or more of the physical, mental, or spiritual aspects of health, either directly or indirectly. Number 5, they should not harm any individual or place anyone's health or life at risk. Number 6, they must have a basis in improving or restoring health and not be promoted, this is important, or offered to diagnose, cure, or treat any illness or disease condition. Number 7, they must not use or recommend the use of any machine, equipment, device, product, protocol, or otherwise that A, violates any law or is considered unsafe, or B, has been negatively publicized by the press, or C, would bring governmental action against you as a licensee or negative publicity to the association. And then number 8, you must not recommend the discontinuance of any legend drugs or controlled substances that are prescribed by an appropriately licensed healthcare practitioner. Obviously, you can refer people back to their medical doctor for that to be considered, but you under your PMA license should not be taking people off of their authorized prescriptions. In the United States, your PMA license is premised upon the First Amendment. And that's in our Constitution. As we know, the Bill of Rights were the first 10 amendments, and it is under your religious freedom that the Congress cannot inhibit what we call the free exercise of religion. Now, there's some concern, some confusion. State medical boards will often say the PMA is not licensed in the state. This is a correct statement when the reference is to being recognized as a license to practice medicine. We are not authorizing doctors to provide medical care. The PMA license does not authorize or purport to authorize the practice of medicine, chiropractic, or any healthcare profession that is licensed or regulated by secular governmental authorities. However, states do not have legal authority to recognize the PMA or to deny it. Accordingly, the PMA is not bound or required to have any state acceptance, authority, or permission. It's an ecclesiastical license, which means under the First Amendment, these can be issued by the organization. But this constitutional freedom, as you might imagine, is not absolute. There are still legal tests as to whether you'll be protected under the First Amendment. It's very fact-specific, what you're doing and how you're holding yourself out. For example, oftentimes the law will ask, are you sincere? Is this really a religious belief, or are you just doing this to maybe do something that you would not otherwise be licensed to do? And some states can impose even limits on spiritual practices if they deem it to be some type of risk to the public or to the consumers. The PMA's licensing rules and regulations, including the Agreement for Wellness Services, are designed to help you solidify and protect your right to practice pastoral science and medicine free from government regulation or problem. When offering your services, this is where certain things become very important and valuable. separating your PMA practice, not commingling it with a state licensed practice, having a dedicated PMA website, having a written practice disclosure, providing all the required PMA explanations, disclosures, and disclaimers in your advertising, and specifically using the agreement for wellness services with every client, thus creating a legally binding agreement, a contract that can be enforced. In other words, what you do, your actions, can support or undermine your constitutional rights. Your PMA license only gives you the baseline, the opportunity to succeed in this area. Now let's talk for a moment about the AWS, the Agreement for Wellness Services. It operates to clarify your relationship with your clients. Among other things, the agreement declares the parties' beliefs in the right to seek health care of their choice. It establishes a private associational relationship. It confirms the client's understanding of the pastoral nature so they can't say they were confused or didn't understand. And it specifies the manner and means by which client grievances and disputes will be resolved. In short, the agreement confirms the private nature of your relationship with your clients and gives you additional constitutionally protected contractual rights. All provisions of the AWS are important and helpful, but you should note specifically your responsibility stated in paragraph 2 to provide your clients a written practice disclosure. And that's very important, describing your education, training, and experiences in the services to be provided. If you're not a medical doctor, you certainly wouldn't want someone to be confused and to think that you are. And so that written disclosure is important. The provision intentionally mirrors requirements of health freedom laws enacted in several states that allow practitioners of complementary and alternative medicine to practice without a license as long as certain conditions are met and disclosures are given to clients. This is simply another legal angle that AWS integrates for your protection. We're helping you meet these required disclosures to protect your right. You can now use the AWS page on PMA's website, and it's listed there in the PowerPoint, to facilitate signing the AWS with your clients through an exchange of emails. You start by submitting your and your client's names and contact information in the online form, and then you can see the fields will fill in, and you are then able to proceed forward. You can now use the AWS page on PMA's website, and it's listed there in the PowerPoint, to facilitate signing the AWS with your clients through an exchange of emails. You can submit your and your client's contact information through the form, and then it will proceed forward with various confirmations. This is a very practical and handy tool that we would encourage you to check out. Now, for a moment, let's talk about how PMA wants to promote you and what it is. It's an established ecclesiastical organization, and it's helping people who value and prioritize their health, who believe in the freedom of choice when it comes to health care, and are seeking natural means for restoring health and promoting vitality and well-being for themselves and others. To these ends, the PMA does 4 things. Number 1, we license spiritually minded health professionals. Number 2, they promote the PMA licensee safety, effectiveness, and growth, including the right to practice. They connect clients and PMA licensed practitioners. And lastly, they provide diverse healthcare resources plus health savings for PMA Health Network subscribers. PMA's newly expanded mission going into this year and beyond is to focus on lifelong health and well-being to help end the epidemic of chronic illness that we see gripping our nation. Strategies that are coming forward to enhance the licensee's legal protections, to improve client clinical outcomes, and to help PMA practitioners grow their practices and reach more clients. It's important to note, and I want to stress this loudly, PMA licensees do not, and again I say do not, practice medicine. More specifically, practitioners of pastoral science and medicine do not examine, diagnose, or treat. They don't recommend or prescribe any drugs or medications. Instead, what they're doing is a completely natural approach founded upon spiritual principles for promoting and improving physical, mental, and spiritual health. We certainly encourage folks health conscious people that is, to join PMA's health network and enjoy the rewards. You can partner with healthcare providers. You can monitor your wellness index. You can learn how to get healthy and stay that way, lose weight, feel great, have more energy, stop and reverse the progression of chronic illness. Set a positive example for their families and friends. You can save money. This is huge in today's world by managing healthcare costs more effectively, having more money to spend on what's important to you. You can receive PMA's Health Network news and gain the resources PMA gathers for Health Network members. Visit PMA's website and you can learn how you can join. Now, let me go through maybe what we'll call the trouble areas, things that can get a practitioner in trouble. Failing to separate your pastoral practice. If you commingle your state licensed operations and your pastoral practices, you have now opened up your entire pastoral practice to state review. Commingling records, providing state license services and pastoral counseling to a client in the same appointment. And PMA, to help promote separation, now has leased websites that you may want to look on the website and see if that would be a help to you. You have really 4 basic choices, and so you can lease a customizable website, or you can engage PMA's web designer to help you. You can create your own website, but don't use a website to promote your pastoral practice other than linking your PMA credential or logo to PMA's website. Now, more things that can get you in trouble: the inappropriate promotion of your pastoral practice. Making claims, advertising that you're diagnosing, treating, reversing, or healing diseases through protocols or supplements. That will catch the attention of regulatory boards. Referring to your services as therapy or treatments. Failing to include the PMA disclaimer. Now all of a sudden a client says, well, I thought, or it was my understanding that you were a medical doctor, something that you're not. Failing to provide clients written practice disclosure that describe appropriately your education, your training, and your experience in the services that you're going to be providing. Please understand, some people get a misconception about the PMA license. It's wrong to think that the PMA license covers everything that you do. It covers you, the individual. It's your license. It's not every activity your office may do. Believing that the PMA allows you to use certain equipment. It does not. A mistaken belief about when PMA will provide legal services. PMA will defend your right to practice under the license, but you are responsible for your own defense of violation of state laws or regulations, and you are responsible for your own defense of any client malpractice action. Now, at the National Center for Life and Liberty, we do have programs where practitioners will join with us, and we provide legal services as general counsel. And so if that's something that would be a help to you, we'd certainly be glad to talk with you. Other things that can get you into trouble: failing to read the policies, rules, and regulations. I know it seems basic, it's all online, it's there for you, but so many folks don't take the time to understand. They pass along hearsay, they don't understand the rules, they don't understand the importance of carrying malpractice or liability insurance. They exercise poor judgment as to referring clients to a more experienced practitioner or back to their own doctors. And this is important. If you have someone that you're not able to successfully serve, very important that you refer them to appropriate trained professionals, or they violate the escrow policy, which is the #1 area we get complaints about at the PMA, is handling other people's money. Please note carefully, describing your practice or services in ways that mirror state-regulated healthcare activity, that will catch attention and oftentimes a board review. Using your position as a pastoral health counselor to influence client actions to benefit you personally. Very careful. You're a person of trust. You're a counselor. Very important that you recognize business deals or other things can create problems for you because the other party, the person that's the client coming to see you, is not an equal negotiator. And then dating or having sexual relations with clients. While not commenting on the morality of this, this is a horrible business practice. Please understand that type of activity can oftentimes create huge liability on a civil side or even sometimes a criminal side. So be very, very careful when you're engaging in any type of personal activity with clients. A best practice: stay professional, stay pastoral, and you'll stay safe. We want to thank you for watching and listening to this licensing and legal issues webinar, and we hope that you found this to be helpful. Again, if you have any questions, visit our NCLL website, ncll.org, or all of the resources that are on the PMA website. We want to make sure that you succeed and do everything you're called to do. Maximum outreach, maximum service. We want you to achieve all of your goals, but to do that with minimal liability. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.
As an existing or prospective PMA licensee, it's very important to understand clearly exactly what your PMA license is. We want you to know what it authorizes you to do and not do, and we want you to make sure that you understand the legal protections it provides and those that it doesn't. We're going to cover, and again, the value of the agreement for wellness services. As I mentioned before, this is critical to your relationship with your clients and to your legal protections as a PMA licensee. And we want you to understand how to practice pastoral science and medicine safely. That is, how to avoid state scrutiny and legal problems in your practice. And of course, we want to make sure we get your questions answered, any that you may have. As David mentioned in his video recording, the Agreement for Wellness Services is available on PMA's website. It can also now be available directly for you on PMA leased websites. But here on this screen is the URL where you can locate the agreement. The Agreement for Wellness Services is such a key part to your practice that we've given it front and center attention on PMA's homepage. So you can access the agreement, as you can see, through the image centered on the homepage screen. There's a link there beneath it. Or alternatively, you can go to the Health Professionals Navigation link on the horizontal navigation bar there, and in the pull-down menu, you can see that the Agreement for Wellness Services can be accessed in that manner as well. When you navigate either directly to the site or from the home page or the pull-down menu on the navigation bar, you'll end up on this page of PMA's website, where the Agreement for Wellness Services can be executed using the online form and facility provided on this page, where you can also download and capture the agreement as a PDF file, or where you can read it there yourselves. And when I say you, actually you or your clients can access the agreement and begin the execution process by going to this page of the website. I'll go over with you in a moment, a little later in the program here, how to use the online facility for executing the agreement with your clients. But the interesting thing that you need to understand is that this agreement structures the nature of your relationship with your client, as I've said before, but that relationship begins with a clear understanding on your part, as well as the client's part, as to what pastoral science and medicine is. What exactly are you offering to the client? So pastoral science and medicine is the term we use to describe the system of natural approaches founded upon spiritual principles for promoting and improving physical, mental, and spiritual health. That's pretty direct and simple, but that's what your PMA license authorizes you to do. That's the services the license allows you to provide your clients. We'll go over in a moment in more detail what pastoral science and medicine encompasses by way of specific services. But it's important for you to understand that when PMA advertises and promotes PMA practitioners and your services to existing and prospective clients of yours, what we're saying is that you help them achieve health improvements By making positive lifestyle changes and following other natural procedures that are scripturally sound, scientifically based, and professionally administered pursuant to acceptable standards of care. And of course, it's the PMA that's administering your license and making sure that you stay within the scope of your practice. And that's the protection that you gain as well as what your clients gain. The pastoral science and medicine services that you're permitted to offer under your PMA license, however, are not unlimited. This is not a carte blanche to go out there and practice any kind of health care that you choose to provide. There is a very specific PMA defined and limited PMA scope of practice. So here, and David went over this in the presentation, but here on the screen right now is the PMA scope of license. And you can see these 8 provisions. I want to leave it here for a moment and talk about a few of these things so that you can study these and see if there's any questions that you have about it and get an understanding of what the PMA license allows you to do and doesn't allow you to do. Of course, fundamentally, this is a pastoral license. So what you offer in terms of healthcare services must be scripture-based. That doesn't mean that everything you offer by way of a healthcare service needs to be found in Scripture, but it must generally support Scripture and not violate scriptural principles and rules. And it must be within the documented education and training that you have as a licensee and what you represented when you applied for a PMA licensee as having, and that we confirmed that you have. And your services must include only safe, natural substances and protocols. The PMA license doesn't allow you, and the scope of practice restricts, as you can see in number 5, that you should not be harming any individual or placing any individual's health or life at risk. And of course, your services must address one or more physical, mental, or spiritual aspects of health, either directly or indirectly. Now, if you look at that, and as number 6 says also, it must have a basis of improving or restoring health, and not be promoted to offer, to diagnose, cure, treat, or any illness or disease condition. I want to separate that for a moment. Let's talk about what you can offer. If you said to me, Peter, tell me what is exactly pastoral science and medicine? What do practitioners offer within the scope of that practice? And if in general you are offering a broad range of services in terms of healthcare, the PMA license could be compared to traditional naturopathy. But there's a distinction. While the naturopathy offers natural protocols, same kind of limitations, the difference in the licensing is that a PMA license is pastoral based. That means that you as a PMA licensee have said, yes, this is a spiritual religious calling on my part. A traditional naturopath doesn't have to make that pledge, and that's not a condition of their practice. The PMA license is a pastoral practice, so this is part of your spiritual mission, your religious beliefs, that you offer healthcare services to your clients. And in terms of scope, you could think of it as the broad, full range of naturopathy. But at the same time, the license doesn't require you to be offering all those services. You could be limiting your practice very specifically. You could be focusing on spiritual health alone, or you could be focusing on mental health or physical health alone, or a combination of all or either of those. And your procedures and protocols can be very narrowly defined if you choose to. It's up to you to choose what services you want to offer. We have a number of PMA licensees, for example, that are practitioners of hijama or cupping, which is a traditional spiritual procedure for clearing of stagnant blood, things like that. So it's your choice, but what you choose to do needs to fall within the scope of the license that's as indicated here on the screen. And then in terms of what you cannot do, it's clear, and you have to make disclosures to your clients that you are not offering PMA services to diagnose, cure, treat any illness or disease condition, because diagnosing, curing, treating any illness or disease condition is the practice of medicine. As a PMA licensee, you are disclosing that you are not practicing conventional medicine. You're not doing these things. You're not doing surgery, and you're not issuing prescription drugs, and you're not making recommendations with regard to dosage. We understand that you're going to be seeing clients that are on one or more medications. It's hard to find somebody today that isn't taking medications. So we understand that's a reality of your practice, but your practice does not allow you, and you should not, be counseling your clients regarding their prescription drugs. If there are issues that come up, if your clients ask you about that, you have to, again, clarify that you don't give advice in that area and that they need to seek that advice from the issuing prescription provider. And if possible, it would be great if you could coordinate your services with those professionals who are providing drugs and prescriptions to your patients. If possible, that can be a very effective way to help a patient move into a better state of health, a client move into a better state of health. And of course, as indicated on the scope of practice here, you must not use or recommend the use of any machine or equipment, device, product, protocol, or otherwise that violates any law or is considered to be, unsafe or unsupported by scientific evidence, or that, has received huge negative publicity by the press. We don't want to bring discredit to you or the PMA about what you're doing within the scope of your practice. So you need to be cautious about that. And then number 8 re-emphasizes the point about not recommending the discontinuation of any regimen, drugs or controlled substances prescribed by appropriately licensed healthcare practitioners. So again, if you have questions about the scope of practice, please put those down in the chat box. We'll try to get them answered for you before the end of the program today. So actually, while we're still on this slide with the scope of practice, there is something else that's very important that I want to mention to you, and it has to do with providing clients or recommending to clients that they take nutritional supplements or other dietary supplements. And the point's this, even though herbal supplements may be natural, they may be from plant or natural herb sources, the active ingredients can still be very potent chemicals. And because of this, herbal or nutritional supplements can have various interactions with prescription drugs your clients may be taking. Or these supplements can react with each other or even with certain foods and, of course, alcohol. So it's important to understand that herbal interactions with prescription medications can interfere with how a particular drug may be broken down in the body. They can enhance side effects of prescription medications, or at times they can even block the intended therapeutic effect of a drug. Bottom line here is, if your practice involves determining if your client has a nutritional deficiency or you're recommending the use of nutritional supplements that you feel can help support the body's immune function or restore a client's health, and your client is taking one or more prescription medications, and as noted before, it's reasonable to expect that many of your clients will be on prescription drugs, you have the responsibility to make sure that what you are recommending to your clients is not contraindicated in view of their medications or other supplements they may be taking. This responsibility is encompassed in PMA's administrative rules and also in the scope of practice of PMA's license, as noted here in item number 7B. It's a responsibility you assume as PMA licensed healthcare provider. And of course, this is just one of the areas of risk you undertake in offering healthcare advice, even pastoral, natural-based healthcare advice. And of course, another reason why PMA requires you carry professional liability insurance. It's a real risk, and you should be protecting yourself from it. So in this context, it's a good idea for you to get to be familiar with and I want to emphasize the word here, reputable online resources that you can use to check for contraindications between supplements you may be recommending and drugs or prescription medications your clients are taking. The Federal Drug Administration, WebMD, drugs.com, and other reliable resources offer extensive information about this subject, and they have online quote checker facilities that you can use to enter the supplement you're intending to recommend and the prescription drug or drugs your client's on, and to see if there are contraindications or reactions that can be expected from that. And of course, if you're in doubt about whether a nutritional product you want to recommend to a client is safe in view of the client's health condition and the drugs he or she is taking, you should alert your client to this and have them check with his or her pharmacist or prescribing physician. So again, just a very important point, something you should note in terms of legal risks and liability. Now, this is another point that I really want to spend a moment on here to make sure that we have a clear understanding about what the PMA license is and how it differs from secular healthcare licenses. The little diagram on the top left of the slide shows the separation of church and state. I mean, there's fundamentally, in the United States, your PMA license is premised upon First Amendment rights that prohibit Congress from passing laws that inhibit the free exercise of religion. So you can see in the diagram Congress, which is represented by the congressional buildings in the center of that little diagram. Congress can issue all sorts of laws governing citizens of the United States, and the structure here constitutionally is similar in Canada, separation of church and state. But Congress can issue laws governing citizens of the United States. So can states operating within the authority of Congress issue laws governing our activities as citizens. But what Congress federally and the states cannot do is get involved. The Constitution provides this protection. Get involved in inhibiting the free exercise of religion. So as you see the church symbols, the four church symbols on the outside of the diagram, and the arrows pointing between them with the do not, enter, do not get involved symbols across those arrows. What that signifies is that separation of church and state, right? So how can we make this clear, relevant to the PMA license? Some of you, when you get in and you're talking about healthcare licenses, and there are state secular healthcare licenses, and now you've got the PMA healthcare license, which is authorizing you to practice healthcare, but it's different. It's pastoral, not secular. How do you really understand that distinction? I think, for me, one of the easiest ways to grab this distinction is to think about the Salvation Army. Many of you may not know that the Salvation Army is an evangelical part of the larger Christian church. In other words, the Salvation Army is a church-based mission. Now, that means that the Salvation Army, and as you may know, they have this military-type structure of officers and followers and different rankings within the Salvation Army. What that really means is that the federal government or state governments can't reach over there and muck around with the Salvation Army, say, no, look, you can't have this military-like structure. That's inappropriate. And you can't, get involved in these missions and activities that you use to help mankind around the world unless you do it with these kind of conditions. That the federal and state governments can simply not dictate. They can't step across that line. And just as the Salvation Army issues a authorization for somebody to become one of its officers, one of military-styled officers, ranking officers, that kind of licensing is not controlled at all by federal or state government. It's completely within the administrative control of the church activities of the Salvation Army. So similarly, your PMA license, you might take that church symbol in the top left-hand corner of that blue little diagram and think of it as the Pastoral Medical Association, an accumulation of Christian-minded leaders who believe that the church has a responsibility to be involved in natural health care and offering natural health care services to citizens of this country and the world. And in that context, the Pastoral Medical Association reviews and issues licenses to PMA licensees. That the Pastoral Medical Association qualifies and determines whether or not they meet the PMA licensing standards. And once that license issues, now holding that license, you can offer the services free from governmental regulation, oversight, and control. So the federal and state governments can't come and say to the PMA license or PMA organization, look, no, you have to add this criteria in order to accept somebody as a licensee. That license stands completely separate from the licenses that the state governments are issuing to doctors and chiropractors and acupuncturists and registered dietitians and so forth. Your PMA license is separate and distinct. So could you, for example, as an individual, go and become licensed as a minister to preach a religious belief? Certainly. Well, who would issue that license to you? Not the state or federal governments, right? Those licenses would be issued by a ecclesiastical or a religious authority. And once you have that license, then you're entitled to operate under that ministerial license and to preach and do whatever that ministerial license offers you to do in terms of advancing your religious beliefs. And similarly so, the PMA license authorizes you to provide natural health care in terms of what we've talked about within the scope of that license. So now where does the confusion come in sometimes? Because, for example, you'll get a medical board comment or the report pressing, a newspaper report reporting, for example, and this occurred recently in California, where there was a medical board comment and reported by the press that the PMA license is not recognized in this state. Well, that's a correct statement on its face if, from the perspective of the medical board, someone's asking the medical board, look, does the PMA license allow PMA licensees in California to practice medicine? And the answer to that is no. That's a correct statement. It does not. It's not recognized as a license to practice medicine. But that does not mean that it's not a legal license. It does not mean that it's not a legal pastoral license. And this issue came up in Kentucky. We can talk about that a little bit further, perhaps. But this issue has been challenged in a given state. And Kentucky, at one point issued a cease and desist order for all chiropractors who were PMA licensed in the state of Kentucky to stop practicing pastoral medicine. But within a few months, just a few months, with the legal team of the PMA talking to the Attorney General's office of the state of Kentucky, that decision was reversed, and the Kentucky Board of Chiropractic Examiners published, and it still exists on its website today, the recognition that chiropractors in Kentucky can also be licensed as pastoral medicine practitioners. And the condition of that recognition is that the PMA license is pastoral in nature. And what's important is the separation of the chiropractic practice from the Pastoral Medical Association practice, and making sure that the clients of the pastoral medical practice understand that they are not being treated by a licensed practitioner when they receive PMA pastoral science and medicine services. Now, hopefully that will give you a little clear distinction about what the PMA license is. But again, recognize that the PMA license does not authorize or purport to authorize the practice of medicine. It doesn't purport to authorize the practice of chiropractic or any healthcare profession that is licensed or regulated by secular governmental authorities. And in the same way, the states don't have legal authority to recognize or deny the recognition of the PMA license. Again, the diagram on the top left of this slide shows the separation of church and state. So not only can the state government not come over and tell the PMA what the PMA can or cannot do, The state government can't, even if it wanted to, because of the constitutional prohibitions, uh, say, oh, we recognize the PMA, we think it's a great organization, and they can come and do what they want to do in our state. And the bottom line is the state can't cross that boundary to either recognize or deny the license of the PMA or its validity. And as a result of that, just like the Salvation Army, the PMA is not legally bound or required to have any state acceptance or authority or permission, to pursue its ecclesiastical mission. And you, as a PMA licensed practitioner, you do not need state approval or authority to offer pastoral science and medical services pursuant to your PMA license. But again, remember now, and this is very important, this constitutional freedom is not absolute. There are still legal tests as to whether what you claim to be constitutionally protected is in fact religious-related activity or free speech. So we need to get clear on that understanding as well. So what do we mean by this? Well, it's important to understand that your assertion of your constitutional freedom and the fact that you own a PMA license alone may not be enough because of what you are doing in terms of your activities or what you are saying. On a fundamental level, in every case, the law is free to question whether you're sincere in your beliefs. So PMA licensees, as you know, take a pledge. You pledge that you share certain common beliefs, that you accept certain responsibilities, and that you are sincere in your religious, spiritual commitment to practice pastoral science and medicine. So what does that really mean? Well, let's say you apply for a PMA license, you sign the pledge, you come on board. Now you're a PMA licensee and you're out offering pastoral science and medical services, but privately you're telling your friends and family, wow, I just signed up with the PMA because it gives me this other opportunity to skirt these federal laws out here. And in other words, you weren't sincere when you signed the pledge. Let's say you're atheist, right? And you make it well known that you're atheist or agnostic. Now, you are creating evidence that you were not sincere in coming on board with the PMA. So your sincerity can be challenged by state secular authorities. And the PMA licensing rules and regulations, they include the requirement to enter into the agreement of wellness services. This brings us back around to the agreement of wellness services and how key it is and in establishing the separation of your practice. And it's the PMA agreement for wellness services is written very specifically to help you solidify your right to practice as a pastoral science and medicine practitioner, free from governmental regulation. So I hope these things are getting clearer for you now. But again, if you have questions about any of these points, please write them down in the chat box and we'll get them answered for you. So when you look at establishing your PMA services, the critical point, just like that diagram we were looking at a moment ago, separation of church and state becomes very important, and particularly if you are licensed by the state to practice medicine or naturopathy or chiropractic or acupuncture, whatever. If you are practicing under a state licensed health care and you're offering healthcare services under that state license, or if you're offering healthcare services that are secular in nature, even though you may not need to be licensed, right? For example, in Arizona, you can offer nutritional services. You don't need a license. But if you're providing a secular healthcare service and you have a PMA practice, you in your mind, just like church and state needs to be separated, you have to separate those practices. And so you separate your PMA practices. You can do that by having a dedicated PMA website. And as mentioned before, PMA has now designed websites that you can lease for that purpose. And you need to have, as part of your pastoral medical association relationship with your clients, you have to have the PMA agreement on wellness services in place. You also should be providing written practice disclosures, disclaiming that you are practicing conventional medicine, as we talked about before, and that you need to make this separation clear for the public, for your clients, and of course for state regulatory authorities who are looking at what you're doing. In other words, your actions support or can undermine your claimed constitutional rights. Your PMA license only provides the baseline. Now, with all of that understanding, we can come back and look at the AWS in a little more detail, because it operates to clarify your relationship with your clients. And as indicated on this slide, among other things, the agreement declares the parties' belief in the right to seek health care of their choice. It establishes a private associational relationship between you and your clients that is spiritual based in terms of the principles and the practices we've talked about. And it confirms your client's understanding of the pastoral nature of your PMA licensed services. Your client is signing off on that, if you will. They understand that you are not practicing conventional medicine when you offer PMA licensed services. And it specifies the manner and the means by which client grievances and disputes will be resolved. In short, the agreement confirms the private nature of your relationship with your clients. It gives you additional constitutional protected contractual rights. And I can't emphasize that enough. So you have your constitutional rights, but one of the strongest premises in law in this country are contractual rights. And then when you enter into an agreement with your client, the agreement for wellness services, you are defining that relationship, clarifying the relationship, agreeing to the limits and the boundaries of that relationship, and you're doing so in writing, executed by both you and your clients, and those contractual protections reinforce your constitutional protections and your legal rights as a PMA licensee. Now, all the provisions of the Agreement for Wellness Services are important, but I want to emphasize for you, and I think David mentioned this in his video, that it's very important, and in paragraph number 2 to that agreement, you agree to provide your clients a written practice disclosure describing your education, training, and experience in the services to be provided. Now, that disclosure, that written disclosure, is premised upon and intentionally mirrors health freedom laws that have been enacted in several states of the United States. Those health freedom laws allow practitioners of complementary or alternative medicine to practice without a license as long as certain conditions are met and disclosures are given to clients. And those laws require a written disclosure that the client acknowledges receiving, in which you've revealed to the client, or the practitioners revealed to the client, the education, training, and experience in the services and the philosophy behind those services. And when you do that under the health freedom laws, now that those states allow you to practice, or allow a person practicing under those laws to practice without a medical license. So we've incorporated that same principle into the AWS. And you need to give that written practice disclosure. It's a requirement of the PMA rules and regulations that you enter into this agreement and that you provide that written disclosure to all of your clients, independent of the scope of the services that you're providing. So, for example, I mentioned before that some PMA licensees may be offering very narrow scopes of service. For example, the cupping procedure, the blood stagnation relief procedure. If that's all you're doing under your PMA license, you still need to have the PMA Agreement for Wellness Services in place with your clients for your constitutional protections. Now let's talk just a moment about how this license gets, the Agreement for Wellness Services gets issued. I'll do this quickly for you, but when you go to that page of the PMA website that we pointed out before, on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see the form that's entered at the bottom of the page. If you or your client can submit your contact information through that form, and this is part of the process on how you can use this form online to execute the agreement between yourself and your client. What happens is when you or your client fill out this information, and it includes your email address as the practitioner, it includes the client's email address, And if the client doesn't have email, it also includes a space for the client to designate the email address of a person that the client authorizes to receive or send email on their behalf. So they're appointing an agent to receive email communications. So when you fill in this information on the PMA website and you execute or you click through to start the procedure, what happens is that the system will send you an email and it'll send the client the same email. And if the client doesn't have email, it'll send the client's appointed representative an email that says, this is your confirmation email that you've entered, this contact information and the party's information into this email. And that email, that confirmation email, includes instructions to the client, to the person appointed to receive email for the client, and to the practitioner as to what to do next. And fundamentally, the client or the client's agent is instructed to reply to that email by clicking reply to all. And what happens then is that reply to all email is teed up on the client's computer with a copy to you and with a copy to the Pastoral Medical Association. And when the client clicks through and sends that email acknowledging that he or she has received the confirming email message, then that process concludes the execution of the agreement between you, because that email says, I acknowledge receiving the agreement and I agree to its terms, and I'm sending back to you the notice that I, as a client, have received that information. The Agreement for Wellness Services also requires that your compliance subscribe to the PMA Health Network, and that is automatically done when you follow this procedure. As far as the practice disclosure is concerned, the new client contact database that's been set up by the PMA includes, and if you haven't done this yet and you're a PMA licensee, you should go and do this very quickly, get this done. When you update your contact information, there are fields for entering information about the services you provide, about the basis of those services, and your educational background and experience. And those fields in the database will be combined into a written practice disclosure statement that will be delivered to your clients at the same time that the confirmation email is sent to your clients if you use the online facility to sign the AWS with your clients. So the online facility not only concludes the execution of the agreement contractually between you and your clients, it also satisfies, if you've provided that information with your updated contact information to us, it also satisfies the delivery requirement of a written practice disclosure statement to your clients, which your clients also have acknowledged receiving. Now, if you go through this process and you enter the client's name and email address or contact email address for someone who represents the client in terms of receiving or sending email, and you send that off, as a practitioner, your instructions are, once you get the confirmation emails, to make sure that you also get an acknowledgement of receipt from the client that they have received the confirmation email and the AWS and the practice disclosure. So if after you send that off and you get the confirmation agreement, if within a day or so you don't get a confirmation email or an email from your client acknowledging receipt of that, you need to contact your client and make sure that email has been received and the client sends you and the PMA acknowledgement of that receipt, so the document gets appropriately executed between all parties. This slide simply covers what I've mentioned to you before about the confirmation email. You submit the client's contact information online. Everyone gets a confirmation email. That confirmation email will also now include the practice disclosure, assuming you've provided that information in your updated contact information in PMA's database. And then the confirmation email, together with your client's email confirming receipt of the confirmation email, comprise what you need to have that the Agreement for Wellness Services has been executed. Now, of course, you can execute the Agreement of Wellness Services physically with your client, as long as you get signatures and you keep a copy for yourself, you give a copy to your client. But in that case, you as a practitioner should still go online and enter your client's contact information in the form on the AWS page of the PMA website and submit that information so that two things happen. One is the PMA is advised of that, and a record of that agreement between you and your client is maintained for your benefit for the future, and the PMA also gets your client subscribed into the health network, which is part of the agreement. So any questions about this, again, please take time, enter those in the chat box, and we'll get them answered for you. Okay, everyone, this is a good point perhaps to take a deep breath in this webinar and pause for a moment. Because what I'm hoping is that having listened to David's presentation and having gone through the review we've just gone through, that you have a much clearer understanding of the nature of the PMA license, how it differs from secular healthcare licenses, how it stands on its own, and how in order to gain the advantage and a safe legal path of the PMA license, you need to separate your practice from anything that you may be doing in terms of secular healthcare, and you need to be giving clear disclosures and disclaimers to your clients so that they understand that when they receive pastoral medical services from you, that you have stepped aside from any state license healthcare service that you may be providing, and that this is a different practice and that it's pastoral in nature. So as we begin now to look at, and I want to run through this as quickly as possible and touch on some of those diverse legal issues that David mentioned in his presentation, let's take a quick look at how the PMA promotes you once again and how the health network is situated, so that we can also take a look at what you can do to stay out of trouble and or not get yourself in trouble with secular governmental authorities. So understanding how the PMA promotes itself and promotes you is absolutely foundational to your practice. Mentally, you've got in mind that this is a separate practice, and knowing how we're approaching the marketplace on your behalf is critical. So the PMA promotes broadly. It's an established ecclesiastical organization. We serve hundreds of thousands of people, and those people are folks who prioritize and value their health. They believe in health freedom in terms of choice when it comes to health care, who they go to, who they see, the advice and services they receive. And these are folks who are seeking natural means for restoring health and promoting lifelong vitality and well-being for themselves and others. And in large part, these are folks who find comfort in receiving healthcare advice from spiritually oriented healthcare practitioners. And that certainly characterizes the PMA licensees. To these ends, the PMA provides these four important services. So we license spiritually minded health professionals. We promote PMA licensing safety, effectiveness, and growth, including the rights to practice. So, for example, we recently accepted the California Board of Chiropractic Examiners' invitation to go to their July 25 meeting and to talk about the structure of the PMA and to discuss what we're doing and its functionality and PMA's functionality. I mean, unfortunately, the board, I wish, had been more interested in why so many chiropractors are coming to the PMA for licensing. Why are they doing that? But the board wasn't interested in that. The board was interested in whether their focus, you got to understand this, their focus is on enforcement, not on expanding the mission of chiropractic. And when they're focused on enforcement, that means they're looking at their statute, they're looking at their scope of practice of their chiropractic practitioners, and then their whole focus is who's stepping out of line out there, who's getting involved in chiropractic that shouldn't. With that kind of mindset, I think there's a lot being missed, but that's the nature of the environment. It's important for you to understand that as well. So the PMA is educating governmental authorities as part of our effort to extend your rights to practice and having them understand what we're doing and how we are distinct from secular licensed healthcare. The PMA also connects you with clients that are looking for your natural health care services and who, as I mentioned a moment ago, find comfort in dealing with practitioners who are practitioners of faith. And the PMA is offering and marshaling diverse healthcare resources, striving to provide measurable health savings for PMA network subscribers, but also looking for resources that can help you deliver better clinical outcomes for your clients, and that will help you also build your practices and succeed financially. And all this is being done in the context of an expanded mission. I mean, look, it's no surprise to anybody on this webinar that we are in a deep challenge in terms of healthcare in this country. The CDC projects that, just 8 years from now, 2025, that half of Americans will be suffering from one or more chronic illnesses. We need to reverse this epidemic, and the PMA is committed and expanded its mission to help to every extent that we can. So our success strategies for 2017, which we started in 2016, are to, number one, enhance the legal protections that you've got. So the modification of the Agreement for Wellness Services, the incorporation of the practice disclosure requirement, the giving you the opportunity to get at least websites that can help protect you by separating your practices and providing the disclosures that you need to give. We're promoting this not only to you as PMA licensees and prospective licensees, but to the public in general as to what the PMA is doing and what its mission is all about. So part of that commitment is to help you improve your clinical outcomes. We're looking for resources that will offer you and give you access to programs that can increase your client base, that can increase your profitability, that can give you better clinical outcomes, that can be run by staff so they're not using your practitioner time. We're looking for educational resources to help you become better healthcare practitioners and providers. In addition to that, the PMA is looking, as I mentioned before, to connect you with prospective clients. The PMA receives thousands of visitors monthly, new visitors monthly to its website, and we're anxious to promote you and your services. So be sure to make sure that your contact information and the description of your services and everything that's needed for the practice disclosure is current in our database. Now, the other thing that's important to understand is that while we're promoting the PMA and you as licensees in the manner that I've described so far, we are also banging on the table and hitting heavily the fact that PMA licensees do not practice medicine. If you look at PMA's website, you'll see the disclosures that PMA practitioners do not examine, treat, diagnose. We've been over all of this, but the important point here is for you to understand that that message is being given out by PMA constantly in its communications, that you don't diagnose, treat, or cure, or offer to diagnose or treat or cure any mental or physical disease, that you're not practicing conventional medicine as a PMA licensee, and that you're not recommending you're prescribing or recommending changes in dosage of pharmaceutical drugs or medications. We want prospective patients to know that. We want the public in general to know that. We certainly want regulatory governmental agencies to know that. And the complementary part of that message is that what the PMA, Pastoral Science and Medicine, is all about is completely natural approaches founded upon spiritual principles for promoting and improving physical, mental, and spiritual health. And all of that is coming about by natural advice relating to lifestyle and other protocols and services. In this context, when folks visit PMA's website, we encourage them to join PMA's Health Network, get on board, because now we have a better connection with them and we can refer them more readily to you. And we promote these things. I think David had this slide up in his webinar as well, but we encourage them that this is a place where they can learn how to get healthy and stay healthy. We're developing a blog and a newsletter for PMA Health Network members. We're giving them information how they can stop and reverse progression of chronic illness, and how they can be positive examples for their families and friends, and how they can save money by paying attention, being more responsible to managing their health. We are gathering these resources both for them and for you. So when you visit PMA's website today, the in-your-face message is you can benefit with thousands who are enjoying natural health solutions. And I want to encourage you to take the time. I know the PMA's website has got huge amounts of content, but that content is designed for you. It's designed for your clients. It's designed for prospective clients, and it's designed for giving a clear message to governmental, secular regulatory authorities about what the PMA is all about. But you should understand what's on the PMA website, information that's valuable to you and your practice. You should also encourage your clients. We encourage you to encourage your clients to look at PMA's website and the resources that are available to them. It will help educate them as to what your practice is all about. So let's highlight now, in that context, let's highlight now the things that can get you into trouble. The biggest thing is, well, one of the biggest things is the failure to separate your pastoral practice. If you're commingling your advertising with state licensed and secular healthcare services as well as pastoral practice services, you're just asking for trouble. If you're commingling your client records and state licensed practice records and not separating. If you're providing state licensed services and PMA pastoral counseling to a client in the same appointment, you're asking for trouble. The idea here, as we talked about before, separation of state and church, you want to, because as a PMA licensee, you're on the church side of that separation. You need to be separating your practice, pastoral practice, from anything you're doing on the secular healthcare side. You should not be thinking about your PMA license as an expansion of what you can do on the secular side, because it doesn't operate like that. It's totally distinct, totally separate. And if you fail to separate by commingling or doing some of these things, you're just asking for trouble. As I mentioned before, PMA is now offering leased websites. These are professionally designed websites. They can be completely customized to your practice, but the real value of them is that they offer that separate presentation on the front end, and that they include all the disclosures and disclaimers that you need to be making as part of your PMA license compliance requirements. To understand this website promotion thing a little bit more, basically you have 4 choices under PMA's administrative rules and regulations. So number one, it's no longer permissible to promote your PMA practice with other healthcare services. By definition, that's commingling. So you got to do something different. You have to separate. So what can you do? Well, number one, you could lease a customized website hosted by PMA. That PMA's invested lots of money, thousands upon thousands of dollars in designing that website for you. The initial fee is $4.95 and then $27.50 a month. It gets you covered with a separate presentation. And again, PMA, Larry Levinson, the webmaster, will help you customize your practice. The other thing you could do is you can engage Larry, PMA's web designer, to create a customized site for you. Now you're building your own customized site, but you're using Larry's services, who knows how to establish that site in a way in which it is PMA rules and regulations and scope of practice compliant. You, of course, can create your own dedicated website promoting your pastoral services, but if you do that, before you go live with that website, you need to let PMA know about it so that PMA can do a compliance review on the site. That compliance review will cost you $250 to $400, depending upon the complexity of the site that you've designed. And, you know, the important thing is to understand that what we don't want you doing is using a website to promote your pastoral practice on which you have got other secular things happening. What is permissible in that context is for you to mention your PMA credential. So let's say on your chiropractic site, if you're a chiropractor, if you're licensed as a acupuncturist as well, if you have a certification in diagnostic nutrition, if you're certified in functional medicine, if you have a credential, think of any advanced credential, or if you're licensed by the PMA, you can indicate those credentials in promoting your chiropractic practice. And the way you do that is you have your DC designation after your name, and then you could have, if you're a doctorate of pastoral medicine, you could have your PSC.D credential. But while that's okay, you need to also pay attention to the fact that anytime you represent that you have a credential by the Pastoral Medical Association, you need to footnote that credential to indicate that the PMA is the issuing licensing authority, and where possible, if it's electronic, you want to link to the Pastoral Medical Association, and you need to give the disclaimer that as a PMA licensee, you are not practicing conventional medicine, and the remainder of that disclaimer as it's provided on PMA's website. If you put PMA's logo on your website, of course, you need to link it to the PMA website as well. So those are your choices. Let us know if you have any questions about the choices of how to promote your PMA practice in terms of website. Other things that can get you in trouble. Well, certainly the inappropriate promotion of your pastoral practice. And that is making claims relating to diagnosing, treating, reversing, healing, diseases through clinical protocols or substances. If I've been clear, and I hope I'm banging the drum hard enough on this, you understand that the PMA practice is not the practice of conventional medicine. The license does not authorize you to do that. And so if you're out advertising that you can diagnose, treat, reverse, or heal any kind of disease or illness, you're in non-compliance with the PMA license, and you're going to get yourself in trouble. Referring to your services as therapy or treatments. Now, what's going on here is that, remember, when state regulatory authorities are looking at your practice, they're looking for ways that they can say, boy, you're confusing the public. And if you look up words such as patient or therapy or treatments, you'll see that these are typically defined as being intended to alleviate, cure, or heal a disorder or an illness, or that a patient is defined as someone who is receiving medical treatment. So the use of these terms is not a strict violation of PMA licensing standards, but we're talking about things that can get you in trouble. So be smart about this. Use words such as client and protocols and health promotional procedures, and stay away from medical-oriented terminology. And of course, if you're not giving the PMA disclaimer when you're promoting your practice, that is it's a direct violation of PMA licensing credentials. And the failure to give the disclaimer, leaves, for example, if you're saying, this is Dr. Joseph Johnson, and you don't indicate that you're a PMA licensee, but you're calling yourself doctor because you're licensed as a doctor of pastoral science and medicine, and don't indicate the disclosure and disclaimer on your website, now you're leaving your patients potentially confused. And state investigators are going to see that and call it out. So that's why there's a requirement that anytime you promote your credential, you need to give the disclaimer and make reference to the licensing authority. And again, in the same manner, the failure to provide your clients the practice disclosure describing education, training, and experience, which is part of the PMA compliance requirements. Again, it's designed to give the disclosures to the folks that need to understand what you're doing, and you're failing to do that. It's going to get you in trouble. David covered some of these, but let's touch on them again quickly. Other things that can get you into trouble. And there's some misconceptions about the PMA license. And you don't want to spread these misconceptions. You want to understand why they are wrong or mistaken. And that's some people have the belief that the PMA license covers the practice rather than the individual practitioner. That's not the case. Your staff and others you may be associated with are not covered by your PMA license. It is personal to you. Also, believing that your PMA license gives you specific license authority to use specific equipment or specific clinical protocols. That is not the case. I want to emphasize that. So, for example, this issue came up recently in the context of a particular use of a protocol, the cupping protocol. The PMA license does not authorize the PMA licensee specifically to provide the spiritual practice of cupping. On the other hand, if you were to say to us, is cupping covered within the scope of practice of the PMA license? Is it okay to do the cupping protocol? And the answer to that is clearly yes. It's a spiritual-based practice, been around for thousands of years, and it is part of natural health care, so it is covered with your PMA license. But the PMA license is not specifically authorizing you to do cupping. The choice of what you do, as I mentioned before, under your PMA license is up to you. What services you provide, it is your responsibility to make sure that those services fall within PMA's scope of practice. There's a mistaken belief also about when PMA will provide free legal services. And this should be clearly understood by you. The PMA will defend to the hilt its right to issue PMA licenses to practitioners in every state of the nation. And it will defend to the hilt your right to practice under the PMA license. So, for example, in the Kentucky situation I mentioned previously, PMA's legal team was there immediately to defend the chiropractors who in Kentucky were licensed by the PMA and who had been given a cease and desist order by the Chiropractic Board of Examiners in Kentucky. But you've got to understand that while PMA will defend its right and your right to practice pastoral license pastoral science and medical services and pay for that legal defense, you individually as a PMA licensee are responsible for your own defense if you're violating state laws or regulations. If you're putting on a lab coat and putting a stethoscope around your shoulders and you're going out and promoting that you can help cure diabetes in your practice, and then you get in trouble, get accused by the medical board of practicing medicine without a license, or you get accused by the chiropractic board in your state that you are practicing beyond the scope of your chiropractic license, the PMA is not going to protect you. If you're commingling your practices, and as I indicated before, the state regulatory authorities are not going to tolerate the idea of you saying in a particular situation with a particular client that, oh, I wasn't practicing chiropractic when I gave her that advice. I was practicing pastoral medical services. You have commingled your situation, not made it clear to the client, and after the fact trying to explain away what you were doing by referring to the Pastoral Medical Association is going to get you in trouble, and the PMA will not defend your rights legally under those situations. And of course, you're responsible for your own defense of any client malpractice action in which you injure someone. Or it's alleged that you have injured someone. Other things that can get you in trouble, and it just starts, as I mentioned before, I encourage you to go to PMA's website, to look at the practitioner area, the password protected area of the PMA's website, get an understanding of these things, read the administrative rules, read the scope of practice. The things that can get you in trouble come from the failure of understanding PMA's policies, rules, and regulations. Passing along incorrect hearsay about the PMA license or PMA rules and regulations is inappropriate action. It's not in compliance with PMA's requirements. And not understanding the consequences of failing to comply with PMA licensing rules and regulations. If you are out of compliance, the PMA has its own procedures for enforcement, and you're subject to fine, and if the violation of PMA license and procedures or scope of practice is grievous enough, your license can be revoked. or suspended for a specific period of time or revoked. You have the responsibility, once you have been granted the license, to operate within the policies, rules, and regulations, scope of practice of the PMA. One of those rules and regulations is carrying malpractice insurance or professional liability insurance. That's obviously a protection to you. Despite your best efforts, best intentions, and so forth, things tend to go south. If you see enough clients for enough period of time, somebody's going to not be happy, possibly. We hope that doesn't happen to you, but that's the reason for carrying malpractice or professional liability insurance. That's the reason there is a requirement that you do so as part of your PMA licensing, and on PMA's website you can gain access to the companies that offer that liability insurance. Is very reasonable. And then, of course, doing crazy things, exercising poor judgments when referring clients, when not referring clients to more experienced practitioners, or back to their medical doctors, or getting involved in personal relations with clients. And one of the biggest things that we see, this is the greatest complaint that the PMA sees ongoing about various PMA licensees, and that is the failure to follow PMA's escrow policy. What that has to do with is offering a package of services to clients, several $1,000s, where that package of services is paid for or financed up front by the client, and then the services are delivered over a period of time. Technically, ethically, you are not entitled to that money until such time as you provided the services. So if you're taking an advance payment for services and spending that money immediately on a house or a boat or whatever, you are in violation of PMA's escrow policy. Monies taken in advance for services to be rendered subsequently must be put in a dedicated escrow account. And the failure to do so is a violation of PMA's rules and regulations, and can subject you to disciplinary action. So be smart about these things. Take the time to understand what the license involves by way of scope, what you can and can't do, what is correct information about the PMA license and what is not, and adhere to the PMA license. Take advantage of the license in a way that will protect yourself, that will protect you both in terms of your practice and in terms of other legal exposure. And then just a few more things that you should be cautious about to avoid getting into trouble. I think David mentioned these as he was closing as well. Be cautious describing your practice or services in ways that mirror state-regulated healthcare activity. It just doesn't make sense to do that. It's going to draw attention unnecessarily to you. For goodness sakes, please don't use your position as a PMA pastoral counselor to influence clients to take actions that would benefit you personally. I mean, leveraging your position as a healthcare practitioner over clients in this manner is just crazy. It doesn't make sense. And of course, you need to be cautious in avoiding intimate relations with your clients. I mean, it's just asking for trouble. Big picture here, just treat your PMA license as the value it has and bestows on you. Be professional about it. Be cautious about these things. This slide includes a few URLs where you can get information, additional information. Be sure to look at those. The practitioner orientation covers a lot of information that you should understand about your PMA license. The practitioner resources page of PMA's website outlines all the things that we are doing by way of gathering clinical and practice development resources for you as a PMA licensee. And then the last page mentioned here just gives more detailed information about those resources. So what I'd like to do is leave things on a high note for you this afternoon. We've spent a lot of time talking about the value of the PMA license and legal issues, things that can get you into trouble that you want to avoid. The high note I'm referring to is pictured on the slide here. If you go to the website of the National Health Federation, you'll see this announcement. The National Health Federation, as some of you may know, is the oldest health freedom organization in the world. So we're excited about this endeavor and to have the NHF involved. But what's happening here is that the NHF is taking a lead coordinating position in establishing a nationwide health freedom legal services network. And this is being done in collaboration with the Pastoral Medical Association, the National Center for Life and Liberty, and Minneapolis-based Legal Research Center. These reputable organizations are coming together and recruiting lawyers to join this network, seasoned lawyers who will understand and be capable of helping you in dealing with the challenging legal regulatory market that we have across the United States for healthcare practitioners, but their capabilities in terms of breadth of services. These lawyers will be able to assist not only in dealing with state regulatory authorities, but also in establishing your practice, your relationships with your clients. If you want to get together a network in local areas, these lawyers will be able to help you in that activity as well. So we're really excited about this. We're in the process of recruiting attorneys to this network. If you are working with, by the way, an experienced attorney that you think would be interested in joining this opportunity, please refer them to the National Health Federation's website and the Legal Services Network announcement that's there. So again, that's the conclusion of the webinar from a presentation standpoint. Let's go ahead now and address whatever questions you may have. I'll ask Larry Levinson to help out here by reviewing and teeing up these questions for me that you may have entered into the chat box during the presentation.
The first one is, do I have to call, so you mean I can't call our patients anymore?
Well, can't is an interesting word. It's not that you can't. You can call your patients whatever you want to call them. But the issue is, what image are you reinforcing by using that label? If you look up the general definition of patients, just Google patients, you'll see that the word is used in connection with the treatment of some kind of medical condition or illness. So if I'm an investigator and you're telling me that you're doing pastoral counseling under a PMA license, but you're calling your clients patients, then you're creating a conflict. You're raising an issue. So, the PMA, if you were to ask the PMA to do a website or review, compliance review, I'm not sure that using the word patient is strictly a violation of PMA standards. We can get the answer for it on that, but I can tell you this, that if you ask for that review, it will certainly be spotted and critiqued and suggested that you use the word client rather than patients for the reason I've indicated.
Great. Another question is, do the PMA covered services have to be called PMA services, or can they be called functional healthcare as long as the PMA logo is on all paperwork, etc.?
So I need to make a disclosure here. I have decades of legal experience and very good legal credentials, but I'm no longer licensed as an attorney. I gave up my license in order to become a health advocate. But what I'm disclosing to you now is simply that anything that I say on this webinar in response to questions that you ask should not be construed as legal advice. It's not intended as legal advice and shouldn't be construed as legal advice. I operate in a capacity of that I've indicated in building resources for the PMA clinically and for practice development, but not as a lawyer. So if we need to get a legal answer for you, we can do that. Having said that, it's not like I forgot 40 years of legal practice. So I answer the question in the context of my legal knowledge, as long as you understand it's not legal advice. So the question is, can you promote your practice as functional healthcare? And I think the answer to that is yes, that you can. I would say that you can. But if you're referring to yourself as a doctor, for example, because you hold a doctor of pastoral science and medicine license, you need to disclose on that representation that you are using the word doctor in the context that you are licensed by the Pastoral Medical Association. If wherever that disclosure occurs is electronically, and it's easy to do, other than, for example, a business card, you should hyperlink to the Pastoral Medical Association website and making that disclosure, and you should continue with the full disclosure about that you're authorized by the PMA to practice pastoral science and medicine, but as a PMA licensee, you do not, diagnose, treat, cure, etc. The full disclosure. So, if you are promoting your practice under the logo of functional health care, let's say, for example, and you refer to yourself as providing functional health care, what I clearly would suggest you do, that is in the definition of functional health care, you include and make reference to the fact that it is encompassed within the scope of practice of pastoral science and medicine.
Peter, there's lots of questions around the practice disclosure and the AWS. So does everyone need a practice disclosure, and does everyone need to use the AWS, the Agreement for Wellness Services?
The answer to that is yes. It's a PMA licensing compliance requirement. You need to be advising your clients in writing by using the AWS. And like I mentioned during the webinar, the facility for doing that can be done electronically by using the AWS form online and the email procedure for executing it. Or, of course, you can do it physically by printing out the AWS and executing it directly with your client. But if you see the true value of that is if you come under scrutiny of the state medical boards or licensing authorities, or if your client, something happens within the context of your relationship with your client. If you don't have that agreement for wellness services in place, you are you're shooting yourself in the foot from a legal safety standpoint. Because if the client has signed the agreement for wellness services and has received your practice disclosure, then that establishes the nature of the relationship, and you can point to that as having given that clear introduction to what you're doing and having the client's agreement for the services that you're receiving in writing and in hand to either show it to any judicial authority that might be inquiring as a result of a legal action by the client, or any governmental authority that might be inquiring in terms of the nature of your license.
We'll take a couple more questions here. One of them, Peter, is kind of interesting. If one is a spiritual energy healer, very well trained, and does one need to be affiliated with a specific religion? If a person speaks to me about their problems and issues, and I provide spiritual guidance for them, is that illegal?
Well, I can't imagine. And remember, again, not legal advice here. I don't know of any law that prohibits an individual speaking their religious beliefs, even in a healthcare context. And certainly you don't need to be of the same religious faith as the person you're offering that advice to. The challenge that possibly could come into play, but it's resolved on a daily basis in other circumstances, is a state mental board, or state board of psychology or psychiatry, because when you're giving advice to someone that relates to mental activity and what they and perhaps even their belief systems, there are certain areas of secular psychology practice that are restricted and controlled by secular licensing. So if what you are doing could be interpreted as providing psychological counseling to a client, if there isn't a clear disclosure as to what you're doing, then you run the risk of being accused of practicing psychology without a state license. So if you've separated your practice and you are operating under a PMA license, the PMA does not restrict its licensees to being Christian. We have many licensees who are of other faiths. The PMA's mission is structured around providing and having the church, if you will, not the Christian church, but having responsible spiritual entities take the role that they abandoned many years ago in natural health care and getting back into the game because of the need for that kind of counsel. So my short answer is you don't have to be of the same faith. You don't. There's no restriction I'm aware of providing spiritual belief-related counseling, as long as you have a clear relationship established with your client as to what you're doing.
Great. Peter, one more question, and then I have kind of a general question for you. When a PMA licensee advertises, can they call themselves doctors?
Yes, they can. But remember, anytime that you use, well, if you're a doctor of pastoral science and medicine, right? So there are two primary different types of PMA licenses. If you have a doctorate level healthcare related education, excuse me, then your application for licensing will be for a doctor of pastoral science and medicine. Hold 2 seconds. Sorry. And if you do not have a doctorate level education in healthcare, then you will be applying for a diplomat of pastoral science and medicine. So you have to hold the doctoral license, PMA license, in order to refer to yourself as doctor. But when you refer to yourself as doctor, if you're doing it in writing, then you need to follow with the PMA licensed credential, the capital P, capital S, small c, dot, capital letter D, which signifies the doctoral license, and that designation needs to be footnoted to explain that the licensing authority, again, is the Pastoral Medical Association, and as the PMA licensee, yada, yada, you do not practice conventional medicine, and the rest of the disclosure. So having made that disclosure in your promotion, your website, your licensing and so forth, then yes, you can refer to yourself as Dr. Mary or Dr. Jones, or whatever your name is. And if you're doing it in a public setting, if you're giving seminars or talks or webinars online, similarly, you need to make that disclosure. So, for example, were I a PMA doctorate, Larry could refer to me, in a webinar like this as Dr. Jenkins if he wanted to. And I, as long as the disclosure's been made, I can introduce myself as Dr. Jenkins.
Great. Peter, thanks. Lots more questions are coming in. I want to remind people that, let's see, I have a note here from Ken Baker. I want to remind people it's really important for all practitioners to initiate the agreement for wellness services and to have clients agree to those terms and conditions. This is for your own protection. And Peter, if people had questions about how to do that, or does it apply in their situation or whatever, or if they have other questions from this webinar, where could they get answers? Is there someone they can email for answers, or what?
They should just email staff at pmai.us, and in their in the subject matter of their email, just indicate PMA licensing or legal issue question. And if they do that, then those will be directed to the appropriate folks. Possibly I could get some of those, or outside legal counsel could get them for response.
Great. That's it for the questions.
Well, great. I'm number one, I want to apologize that our founding general manager and overseer of the PMA, who I know set aside particular time in order to join us on the webinar, Dr. Eric Carter, has not been with us auditorily. He's been with us, as I can see, on in the coordinator messaging box and so forth, and hopefully he's been listening all along. But I want to extend on his behalf a thank you to everybody who's listened in today, and to let you know that we, and I speak for Dr. Carter here, we are completely committed to advancing the Pastoral Medical Association's mission, as well as its extended mission to address this epidemic of chronic illness that we're having. We really don't have a choice, and we feel very blessed to have you on board and committed to the same mission, and to make sure that you succeed in your practices. As I indicated, we are aggressively looking at resources that will help you improve your clinical delivery and patient outcomes, and also that will keep you at the cutting edge of natural and integrated functional healthcare, and also at opportunities for you to expand your practices and refer clients to you. Also, I encourage everybody to take a look at the opportunity for getting a PMA at least website, and at least talking to Larry about what you may have any questions about such a website or the value of it to you. So then, again, thank you for your time. We'll look and respond to any email follow-up that we got with questions you have. You'll get this complete replay of this webinar as soon as we have it patched together, and with the magic of technology, hopefully that replay can include the video presentation by David Gibbs, outside counsel. So again, thank you for being with us this evening. I wish everybody an enjoyable and safe evening. God bless to all.